Have you ever had a nightmare so vivid, so realistic, that you woke up feeling scared or unsafe, even though you knew you were in your own bed? Now imagine living with that feeling of constant unease when you're wide awake on a daily basis. That's what happens for a lot of people who have PTSD. And this sense of hyperarousal is like they're always on high alert, constantly anticipating something bad is going to happen. This is more than just feeling jumpy. It's a constant state of heightened alertness and can really interfere with a person's day-to-day functioning. This is a continuation of our mini-series about the symptoms of PTSD. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the fourth and final cluster of symptoms in PTSD, which is hyperarousal. Hyperarousal symptoms can vary in intensity and frequency from person to person, and for some people with PTSD, they may experience all of the hyperarousal symptoms, whereas for other people, they might just experience a few of the hyperarousal symptoms that become particularly troublesome or interfering. What happens for people with PTSD is that they experience hyperarousal because their body's natural fight or flight response gets stuck in the on position. Parts of the brain that are responsible for processing fear become extremely hypersensitive, almost like an overly sensitive smoke detector. So the smoke detector is constantly going off, even with just a little bit of burnt toast. It's the same for a person with PTSD. They're in a constant state of physiological arousal, with their body releasing stress hormones like adrenaline that just keep the person on edge all the time, even when there's no real threat. So what are some of these types of hyperarousal symptoms in PTSD? The first is heightened levels of irritability and anger outbursts. Now, to explain this, I want you to imagine that you're like a pot of boiling water on the stove. And typically the water simmers gently, and this represents a calm and regulated nervous system in its natural state. Now imagine a stressful event like being stuck in traffic. The pot might bubble a little bit more vigorously, but once the stressor passes, once you get out of the traffic jam, the water simmers down back to its normal state. The thing is, for someone with PTSD, it's like the pot is already simmering on high heat. Any minor inconvenience or stressor, like being stuck in traffic or being late for a meeting, is the equivalent of cranking the heat even higher. This constant state of simmering tension makes a person much more susceptible to frustration and anger. Essentially, PTSD shortens the person's fuse, so any little thing can cause them to explode in anger. And the problem with these angry outbursts is that they often get directed towards the people who are closest to the person. Spouses, children, close friends, because these are the people that we interact with most frequently and the people who may inadvertently push our buttons when we're in this heightened state. And these angry outbursts can damage relationships and create a vicious cycle of increasing conflict and further anger outbursts, making it even more difficult to manage anger effectively. A second manifestation of hyperarousal symptoms in PTSD includes the tendency towards reckless or self-destructive behavior. This can include things like self-harming behavior, abusing drugs or alcohol, dangerous driving, risky thrill-seeking behavior like extreme sports, unprotected sex with multiple partners, gambling, picking fights with strangers, all sorts of things. And this can seem a bit counterintuitive. Why would someone who's already feeling unsafe seek out further danger? Now, the first reason people do this is that it provides some temporary relief from the hyperarousal itself. The person's in a constant state of on in their fight or flight response, which can be incredibly uncomfortable and anxiety-provoking. So some people with PTSD engage in risky behaviors as a way of trying to escape this turmoil. The self-harming or risk-taking can provide a temporary, albeit unhealthy, sense of relief by providing a different kind of intense sensation. The reckless and self-destructive behavior can also provide the person a sense of control, or at least the mirage of control. PTSD can leave a person feeling hopeless and feeling out of control in their life. So by engaging in these risky behaviors, it's almost like the person is trying to regain a sense of control in some area of their life. It can also provide a sense of control over emotions. As I mentioned in a previous video, people with PTSD can experience emotional numbing as a way of detaching from the overwhelming emotions associated with the trauma. And this emotional numbing leads to a sense of disconnection from themselves and the world around them. And so by engaging in risky behaviors or self-harming behaviors like cutting or burning, it's the person's attempt to try and feel something. The big problem about engaging in these risky and self-harming behaviors is that they don't provide any lasting relief. Rather, the behaviors create a vicious cycle where the person turns to these risky and self-harming behaviors to escape the discomfort of the hyperarousal, only to end up feeling worse and furthering the need to escape from this state. Another example of hyperarousal symptoms in PTSD is hypervigilance, which is a state of alertness and excessive focus on potential threats in a person's environment. People with PTSD become hypervigilant to their surroundings, constantly scanning for anything that might be a sign of danger or threat. Constantly looking for the exits in a room, avoiding certain situations such as crowds because it's difficult to keep track of everyone who's around. Or they may sit with their back to the wall so they can be aware of everything and everyone in the room. And as you can imagine, hypervigilance can be incredibly draining and exhausting. Constantly scanning the environment for threats is mentally exhausting, making it difficult to concentrate or focus or get anything done. The constant focus on potential danger or threat causes a person to be constantly on edge, fueling anxiety and making it difficult to relax. And constantly scanning for danger can cause a person to avoid social situations or public places because it's just a lot easier to stay home so they're not always having to scan everything around them. The next example of hyperarousal symptoms in PTSD is an exaggerated startle response. For people with PTSD, their startle response is exaggerated and easily triggered, making them feel constantly jumpy and on edge. Now, the startle response in people is a basic brainstem response. When a sudden, loud, or unexpected event occurs, the brainstem sends a signal to our muscle, causing a brief involuntary contraction, which prepares our body to take action to fight or run away, depending on the perceived threat. But in PTSD, the fear processing part of the brain, something called the amygdala, becomes hypersensitive due to the traumatic experience. And what this means is that even little things that wouldn't normally trigger a startle response, like a knock on the door or the phone ringing, gets misinterpreted as a threat by the amygdala. And this leads to the exaggerated startle response, which can include a person basically jumping and reacting, increased heart rate, muscle tension, sweating, a surge of fear or anxiety, leaving the person feeling jittery and on edge after the startle response. And it can take some time for a person with PTSD to calm down, leaving them feeling shaky and tense for an extended period of time. Now, one of the more interfering hyperarousal symptoms of PTSD involves difficulties with concentrating. And to understand why this happens, imagine your brain kind of like the CPU of a computer. When you're in a relaxed state, the CPU works perfectly fine, allocating resources to whatever task is at hand, whatever you're working on. But in the hyperarousal caused by PTSD, your brain is constantly being bombarded with signals from the amygdala, which perceives threat everywhere. Remember, it's the fear center. So this is kind of like overloading the CPU with a lot of unnecessary tasks, making it difficult to focus whatever you're trying to focus on. And there are a number of ways in which hyperarousal and PTSD affects concentration. The intrusive thoughts about the traumatic event or worries about the future can hijack a person's attention, making it difficult to stay present and focused on what they're trying to do. A person with PTSD is often distracted by sensory overload. Hypervigilance to their environment makes a person hypersensitive to what's going on around them, who's around them. Various sounds and even minor background noises become distracting and disrupt focus because the person is so hyper-aware to all of this stuff. And PTSD can interfere with executive functioning, which are those higher-level brain processes that are responsible for things like planning, organizing, and controlling your thoughts and actions. Hyperarousal can negatively impact executive functioning, which makes it difficult to sustain focus and be organized to complete tasks. And as a result, this can have a ripple effect on various aspects of life, including impaired work performance, as a person may miss deadlines, they're less productive at work, or they may make errors in judgment. Students with PTSD may struggle to concentrate in lectures or complete tasks on time or perform well on exams. It can also lead to problems in relationships, as a person with PTSD may have difficulty following conversations or might appear distant to other people because their mind is so preoccupied with other things, and this can lead to problems in relationships with family and friends. And the final hyperarousal symptom in PTSD involves difficulty sleeping. Hyperarousal interferes with sleep in a number of ways, including difficulty falling asleep. When your body's constantly in high alert, it becomes very difficult to switch off and relax to go to sleep. Intrusive thoughts related to the traumatic event or worries about the future can cause a person's mind to stay on and keep racing and make it difficult to fall asleep. And even if the person's able to fall asleep, hyperarousal can result in difficulty staying asleep throughout the night. A person's sleep can be interrupted by nightmares about the traumatic event, or even minor noises in the environment can trigger a startle response, which wakes a person up from their sleep. So for people with PTSD, their sleep tends to be very shallow and non-restorative. And so even if the person's able to sleep for several hours, the quality of the sleep is often very poor and results in the person feeling unrefreshed from their sleep, and they still feel tired, irritable, or foggy when they wake up. And as you might expect, like most things with PTSD, this can lead to a vicious cycle in which sleep deprivation fuels anxiety and hyperarousal symptoms. As the more tired and exhausted a person is, the more difficulty their brain has in terms of regulating emotions and managing stress, which just contributes to increased anxiety, tension, and difficulty relaxing. So these various hyperarousal symptoms in PTSD can lead to lots of problems and difficulties in a person's functioning and in their interpersonal relationships. And these hyperarousal symptoms can lead to vicious cycles in which some of the hyperarousal symptoms fuel other hyperarousal symptoms and just make the PTSD worse for the person. And if you're wanting to learn more about how to address or manage PTSD symptoms, I encourage you to check out this video. So that's all for today's video. As always, thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one.